I kept seeing a phenomenon in the startups I was working with. Everyone kept asking themselves, are we making a sufficient progress to believe that our original strategic hypothesis is correct? Or do we need to make a major change? That change is called pivot. A pivot is a change of a strategy without changing your vision. I once saw a cartoon in a magazine where a woman said, I'm not leaving you, I'm pivoting you to another man. So that is really what it's all about.
Let's describe a startup's phase as a runway. Your first idea leads to your first experiment, which is your first attempt to success. Most of first attempts tend to fail, so you pivot and try something else. There are two ways the story can end. You continue to experiment and pivot until you achieve your goal, and then you soar off into the sunset. On the other hand, you continue to experiment and pivot until you crush and burn.
Entrepreneurs often speak of the runway that their startup has left. It is usually defined as the remaining cash in the bank. But the true measure of the runway is how many pivots a startup has left.
There is no bigger destroyer of creative potential than the misguided decision to persevere. Companies that cannot bring themselves to pivot to a new direction can get stuck in the land of the living dead, neither growing enough nor dying. The more pivots you are able to fit in, the more opportunities you have to make a breakthrough.
There's one thing you need to understand about the pivot, and it is very simple. You don't get into your car, put your GPS and ask, hey GPS, where do I want to go? Of course he doesn't know, he's just a robot. He only helps you get where you want to go. So your vision is going to be your destination. Now, let's say you run into an obstacle. You don't just drive your car around into the obstacle over and over again. No, you find a solution along with the GPS and find a new way around. Most of the startups that succeed do that. They start with a great idea that sounds great, but turns out to be terrible.
YouTube started as a dating site, but people had the option of uploading videos, and that was what people really liked. So they made a huge pivot and turned their platform into a video site. They used what we call a zoom-in pivot, which we will explain later.
The most legendary pivot in social media history is the transformation of Twitter. The first version of Twitter was a thing called Audio, which was a podcasting service. When iTunes came up, Audio's founders were scared they were going to fail, so they hugely pivoted and created Twitter in 6 weeks. Another example is the transformation of Vodafone, all done by CEO David Benetti. His first product concept was the social network of verified voters, a place where people passionate about civic causes could get together, share ideas, and recruit their friends. David built his first MVP for over $1,200 in about 3 months and launched it. The first month's results were not the expected ones, so he spent the next 2 months and another $5,000 testing new product features, messaging, and improving the product's design.
After obtaining better results, but not the one expected, he faced a difficult challenge of deciding whether to pivot or persevere. There was one point where David got stuck in the land of the living dead. David had to keep in mind that the more money, time, and creative energy that has been sunk into an idea, the harder it is to pivot, so it was a hard decision to make. Finally, David decided to pivot and test a new hypothesis.
He decided to undertake a zoom-in pivot, refocusing the product on what previously had been considered just one feature of a larger whole. He decided to change Vodafone into a product called At2Gov, a social lobbying platform. David continued testing and making different pivots until he reached his goal and finally set his company and product the way he wanted to.
Alright, we have to get something clear. Pivots require courage. Most of the entrepreneurs are afraid, but acknowledging failure can lead to a deeply, dangerously low moral. That is why it is so hard. But most entrepreneurs' biggest fear is to accept that their vision will be proven wrong. To avoid this type of problems, entrepreneurs need to face their biggest fears and be willing to fail, often in a public way. In fact, entrepreneurs who have a high profile or are already recognized by the public have a bigger problem when it comes to failure. The word pivot sometimes is used incorrectly as a synonym for change. A pivot is a special kind of change designed to test a new fundamental hypothesis about the product, business model, and engine of growth. There are several types of pivots, which need a bit of explanation to be understood.
Zoom in pivot. In this case, what previously was considered a single feature in a product becomes the whole product. Zoom out pivot. What was considered the whole product becomes a single feature of a much larger product. Customer segment pivot. In this case, the product hypothesis is confirmed, but for a different customer than originally anticipated. Customer need pivot. The target customer has a problem worth solving, just not the one that was originally anticipated. Platform pivot. To change from an application to a platform or vice versa. Business architecture pivot. A startup switches architecture.
Value capture pivot. A company can change its value capture method from monetization or revenue models to other forms. Engine of growth pivot. A company can change its growth strategy to seek faster or more profitable growth. Channel pivot. The product could be delivered through a different channel with great effectiveness. Technology pivot. A company discovers a way to achieve the same solution by using a completely different technology.
Companies have a strong desire to align their public relations stories around their heroic founder and make it seem as if their success was the inevitable result of a great idea. Pivot is the heart of the Lean Startup method. It is what makes the companies that follow the Lean Startup method resilient in the face of mistakes. With the Lean Startup method, if we take a wrong turn, we have the tools we need to realize it and the agility to find another path.